Hello, good afternoon, good morning, good evening, whenever you're going to be watching this message. I hope it finds you well. As we started last week, we do have a couple of series that we're going through. Since you haven't watched the first series last week, I want to introduce myself again. My name is Roman, and I go by Romy. Fantahoon is my last name. I have a very funny last name. I'm not funny, but some people say Fanta is like the soda Fanta, and then Hoon, and that's how like my American friends pronounce it, Fanta Hoon. So I hope you're having a wonderful day today. We're gonna go through the series two, part two of uh, the potter versus the clay. um, we looked at the potter last week and who the potter is and what the clay is. And in that series, I really encourage you to go back and watch that before you watch this one because it's connected. But we did lay a foundation of the potter, and which is God, and we are the clay. So in that series, if you really look, if you really listen to that teaching last week, it all talks about, God is the potter, the three P's, and God is purposeful, and God has a plan, which means that we looked at somebody's life. We looked at Job's life, and Job knew God was his potter, but Job did not know that God had a purpose and God had a plan in his life. And we saw where he was debating, or he had a question for God, and specifically didn't say God was unjust, but he wanted to talk to God, and he said, "What did I do to God? What have I done to deserve what happened to me?" Because he lost his family, and God showed up. When God showed up, he said, "You're the potter. I am the clay." And you can see clearly Job said, "You had a plan, and I didn't know nothing about it." And then he also said, "You have a purpose in my life." And he said, I don't know what I'm talking about anymore. But the biggest thing that I hope that you got out of that message was Job said, "I used to hear about you. I used to hear about you from a distance, but now I know you. But now I met you. Now you've become my life." So it's all about salvation. It's all about, if you come to God and you ask, "What am I doing here? What's my purpose?" That you face God and you meet God, and God reveals himself to you, and you say, "God, you are my potter, and I am your clay, and you are my salvation. And I used to hear about you, but now I met you." And I hope you got that from that first series. We're going to continue today with the second part of the clay, the potter versus the clay. Today I'm talking about the clay. And last week I talked about a lot about perspective. Like a lot of times, even when we talked about Job, he looked at things from his own perspective, and he's like, "Look, what have I done?" But he never looked at things from God's perspective. But when God showed up, he started seeing from God's point of view, God's perspective, from God's lenses. And that's when he said, "Now I see. Now I know. Now I met you. Now I understand you." So today we're going to look at the clay. The clay, not the clay from our own perspective, but the clay from God's perspective. What's the clay? What's the purpose of the clay? So today we're going to learn about three C's. Last week we learned about three P's, and today we're going to learn about three C's. And I'm going to go back to Romans that we read last week. I'm going to go back to that chapter again because it's going to explain what I want to talk about, and then I want to talk about who had that kind of character about a clay, and then we hopefully go through the teaching and really understand what the clay does, or who the clay is, or who the clay that God says that the clay is. But before that, I want to tell you today, before I left my house to come in and to be taped, I was saying goodbye to my son, Caleb. So I was kissing him and hugging him goodbye, like before I come. And he's like, "Hey, Mom, when are you coming back?" The kids are like, as soon as you leave, they want to know when you're coming back home. So the best thing happened. He grabbed my hand. He said, "Can I pray for you before you go?" And I said, "Sure." And I should be asking you to pray for me, and you're asking me if you could pray for me. And one of the things that he said when he was praying for me, he said, "Let the glory be to God, not my mom." He said, "I don't want her to be magnified or anything in this message." He said, "Whatever that she's been preparing, that she would glorify you." And I agree with that prayer. So my prayer, I hope my teaching today is for the glory of God, that you would see the glory of God, that you would understand the glory of God. So I just said amen. I agreed with that prayer. So I'm going to go to Romans 9, and I'm going to read what I started last week. Paul is asking questions. He's saying, hey, you might ask these questions, and he's giving an answer as well. So like I said, chapter 9 really has nothing to do with what I'm trying to teach here, but I'm taking the examples that he used in that chapter, and then I'm going to refer back to another story. But I want to read this to you. So we talked about last week, God has mercy on whomever he wants mercy on. He could do whatever because he's the potter, right? So then he says this, chapter 9, verse 19. One of you will say to me, then why does God still blame us? For who's able to resist his will? But who are you, a human being, to talk back to God? Who are you, a human being, talking back to God? Shall what is formed say to one who formed it, why did you make me like this? Can something that has been formed, can an Apple phone talk to the Apple CEO or the Apple company and say, why did you make me an Apple phone? That's exactly what it's saying. So it's made. You're the clay. God is the potter. He made you. Can you talk back to him? Can you ask him why he made you like this? And then it says, does not the potter have the right to make out of the same lump of clay some pottery for special purposes and some for common use? This is a very, very essential concept that I really want to talk about today, because we're talking about the clay. So the clay is us. We have a potter. So we talked about the potter last week. So we're talking about us today. So potters, us, we've been formed, we've been designed by the potter. And what it's saying is, Paul is saying, who are you to talk back to God? Who are you as a potter to tell him, no, you shouldn't have made me this way? That's a very amazing concept. So today, I charge every one of you, I beg you to really look into your heart and to really say, I am the clay. That is going to be our foundation today, because we have a hard time sometimes because we tend to take over in life. We tend to say, oh, I have done that. I have accomplished that. I can do this or I can do that. And as a clay, from God's perspective, God is saying, I mold you. I designed you as a certain way, as a certain clay. So you don't really have any say in your life. Because if you start seeing from God's perspective, then a clay is going to be used by the potter. But in order for a clay to be a clay, it has to go through fire. It has to go through fire. It has to meet fire. Clay and fire, they have to meet to be formed. So from God's perspective, today we're going to look at the clay. And in a couple of chapters, I'll show you. In Romans, it talks about how it says, we are the clay and we have to go through fire. So the first thing that I want us to proclaim today is, I am the clay. I am the clay. This is the first thing that anyone that wants to have a relationship with God has to admit. Romans chapter 12 says, therefore, I urge you, brothers and sisters, in view of God's mercy, to offer your bodies as a living sacrifice, holy and pleasing to God. This is your true and proper worship. I'm going to read it again. Therefore, I urge you, brothers and sisters, in view of God's mercy, to offer your bodies as a living sacrifice, holy and pleasing to God. This is your true and proper worship. So if you look at what worship means, worship is a relationship, right? So what it's saying is, when you start saying, yes, you are the potter, I am the clay, and once you recognize that you are the clay, you are coming into a covenant with God saying, I am going to be a living sacrifice. A living sacrifice, if we look at Old Testament, or in the Old Testament, when they present sacrifices, the sacrifice went through fire. If you look at Isaac, right, and when his father, Abraham, took him to sacrifice him before God, Isaac asked, where's the fire, right? Because a sacrifice has to meet with fire. And a clay has to meet with fire. So you're saying that I am not going to do my will. I am not going to do what I like to do, but I'm going to do your will, because you are the potter and I'm the clay, and I'm going to submit to you, God. I'm going to give my life to you, God, and I'm going to be living as a burning sacrifice to you on a daily basis. Because there is a problem with a clay, because the kind of clay that we are, we talk back to God. The kind of clay that we are, we always think that we know better for ourselves than what God plans for us, how he designed us. We think we know better. So that's the problem. So, but if you're sacrificed, if you're meat with fire, you are going to become, you're going to be in a covenant every day because you're sacrificing, you're submitting, you're saying, I'm the clay, you're the potter. The second point that the third point is where I'm going to really stay. That's going to be my main message. But the second C that I want to talk about today is this. The second C is I am created. I am created. So, which means that when we say that I am created, it's a big, big, bold statement because sometimes we act like we are the creator. Sometimes we act like for our lives, we act like we are the potter, but we are the clay. I want to remind you today, we've been created by the creator. We have a creator. We are created. So what we have is we're planned, we're molded, and we are designed for God. And as a clay, we have to meet fire every day. So when I think about having a creator and being a clay, is I think about every time there was a parable that Jesus talked about, or an example that Jesus gave. He said, so there was a rich man. All of the things that he got from his farm, and he has it all in the barn. So now he's like, I have everything that I need. He said, eat, sing, and live well. And that's a clay talking. That's the problem. That's a clay. God is not saying this about the guy. The guy is saying that about himself. And he's talking to his soul. He's talking to himself. He's like, just be glad that you have everything that you need. But Jesus said, so sad, because he didn't know that night his soul was going to be taken away from him, that he was going to die. A merely man, a clay, taking the creator's job and says, I know what I need. I know what's good for me. I am the creator of my life. Isn't that what the media tells us to? Isn't that all the whatever books tell us every day now? It's like, it's you. You are your own boss. You create your own destiny. Whatever you say is going to be in existence. If you say that you're going to be doing this and this is what's going to happen, you create your own path. Isn't that what they tell us? But the Word of God says, you're a clay. You have been designed for God. So the third and my main focus today, because I want to talk about a man who has displayed this idea or this point for me. I'm going to talk about him. And I really want us to know that we are the clay. That I want us, when I finish this teaching today, that you would submit and you would bow down and you would sacrifice your life as a clay. So this is the most beautiful part of being a clay. A clay, when a clay becomes content. When a clay says, I am content. And a lot of times in life, Um, we live in a world where in order for you to be content, get a lot of money, in order for you to be content, look in a certain, live in a certain way, look in a certain way. They tell us if you have this much money, if you have this much success. So we count what we could do, we count what we have, and then that's how you measure your contentment. But it is so false. I can prove it to you because a lot of people that you've known, successful, their fame is out of this world. They have become the person that people really worshiped as God. Like I can name one, Michael Jackson. I mean, so many of them, right? They say they became a king. They became, people were would cry out for them. They faint, try to touch them. And it would, and what they tell us is that would guarantee your path, your success, your contentment. It is so far from the truth. It is so far from the truth. Because when you collect the cars, when you collect the fans, when you go to the ladder and you have that career, you become that CEO, you have that money, that you become empty, you wanting more. Your contentment is going out of the window. But I'm going to show you someone today from our Bible, an amazing guy, and he's a youth just like you. Not even a youth, he's even, they say that he's even younger than a youth. So I'm going to show you a young guy, a boy, who was so content. How do you become content? As a clay, because a clay doesn't have any say because you've been designed by God. So a clay has to say, I'm a clay. I have a potter. We have to recognize that. And then a clay has to say, I have a creator. I'm created. So a created being has very, very limited things that they could do. So, but now a clay also has to be content to really live the life that God laid out for you and me. And so this is a fascinating story. I'm going to go through with you. I know you know this story, but to me, when you look at it from God's perspective, when you look at it as the clay that we're trying to learn today, I think it's the most fascinating story ever. And so we're going to learn about, I'm going to read about David. So if you go to 1 Samuel chapter 17, there's this story that we all know about David and Goliath. But I really, my point is not even about Goliath. I want to talk about the contentment of David. So not to take too much time, I'm going to tell you most of the stories, but I'm going to read some of it from here because it's fascinating. It's fascinating. So there is, the Philistines were enemies to Israelites. So the Philistines are out there. They're saying, hey, okay, there's a deal. We're going to attack you. And then they have this guy, 7 feet tall guy. And he's like, hey, whomever. I mean, even, I don't know, LeBron James, how tall is he? Like 6'2", 6, I don't even know, 6'7". I don't even know how tall he is. But this guy's like taller than all the basketball players that we know of. So this guy, a warrior, like he was trained to kill or to be a warrior since his youth. So he grew up to fight. He trained his body So he has all the right materials. He has the right mindset. He's ready to fight. So that's the best thing that the Philistines got. But then the Israelites, Saul is the king. Saul is scared. All of them are scared. And for 40 days, this is happening. So the Philistines are like, hey, you want to go ahead and fight us? And then this Goliath guy is coming out and he's like, send someone to fight me. Okay, I am the best of the warriors that we have, in our gatherings. Who do you have? Bring someone. So everybody's scared. Everybody's scared. Even Saul, he's the king. And everybody's afraid, so they go out, they hear all of these things that the Philistines are saying, and then they become afraid, they go back to their camp. But something fascinating happens. A little boy that comes to the camp, and he's bringing food for his brothers, his big brothers. The big brothers are like there maybe to fight, but they're not even going out there to fight. They're just listening. They keep on listening to the bully. He keeps on saying, who's gonna fight me? Come on, bring your best warrior. And this David kid comes out and he said, hey, what's happening? He asked his brothers. And his brothers were like, I think that the other people around him, they were like, oh yeah, this is what's happening. There's the Philistines, and then there's this guy, Goliath. He's going to eat us alive. We're scared. And he's asking, he's like, okay, so there's nobody to fight him? So he's asking more information. And then his own brothers got mad at him, angry at him. And they were like, go, watch your sheeps. I mean, what did you do with the sheeps anyway? You're a shepherd. You're a little boy. You don't know nothing. Does that sound like us? See, there's the enemy out there. There is the scheme of the enemy that tells us, you're nothing. You're nobody. God doesn't love you. But then there are our own brothers and sisters that could discourage us. That could say things to us. His own brothers said, well, you're a little boy, just go do your thing. And so he's like, what? I can't even ask a question? And then he goes to a different group of people and he starts asking again. And then he says something out of this world. I love it. All right, so I am going to read So David said to Saul, well, okay, now I'm going to read 29. So 1 Samuel 17, chapter 17, chapter 29, starting chapter 29. Now what have I done? So here's the brothers discouraging him from asking. So he's like, now what have I done, say David? Can I even speak? He then turned away to someone else and brought up the same matter. And the men answered him as before. What David said was overheard and reported to Saul, and Saul sent out for him. So now Saul heard about this little boy asking about this Goliath, and he's like, who's this guy? Why are the Philistines like screaming? And then how come nobody from our side is like answering to them? So David said to Saul, let no one lose heart on account of this Philistine. Your servant will go and fight him. David says, it's okay, I can go fight him. A little boy, never trained to be a warrior. He's not even in a camp. He's just delivering food. He's a shepherd. And he said, I can fight him. This is laughable. Like, look at what Saul says to him. Saul replied, you are not able to go out against this Philistine and fight him. You are only a young man, and he has been a warrior from his youth. So Saul said, nah, don't even try. This guy has been trained to be like this, to fight. And he said, you're just a little boy. Yeah, no. But David said to Saul, your servant has been keeping his father's sheep. When a lion or a bear came and carried off a sheep from the flock, I went after it, struck it, and rescued the sheep from its mouth. When it turned on me, I seized it by its hair, struck it, and killed it. Your servant has killed both the lion and the bear. The uncircumcised Philistine will be like one of them. Because I want you to listen to this. Because this is what contentment means. This is how content David is. He knows one thing. He said, because he has defied the armies of the living God. He is going to be defeated, not because I am good, not because I'm a soldier, not because I'm a warrior. He's saying he is going to be defeated. I bet you today, I give my life for it. He's saying because he has defied the living God. The fight is not with us. The fight is with God. And this is what content people say. This is what a content Clay says, because he's saying, yeah, you're right. He can kill me. He has a sword. He's a warrior. He's been trained for this. But he's saying, I have a relationship with God. God is a living God. He is not talking about us. He's talking, the fight is between the Philistines and the Goliath and God. Because he defies God. And the Lord who rescued me from the paw of the lion and the paw of the bear will rescue me from the hand of the Philistine. He said, I was delivered from the lion and the bear, not because of my ability. I mean, I'm a little boy. I am just shepherding my sheep. But when they come, the lions, when the bears are coming and they're taking my flocks by their mouth, he said, I go and snatch it back. And then when they rise up to kill me, he said, my Father, my God, rescued me. And he said, this is going to be the same thing. So, really, in order for a Clay to be content, this is what it takes. One, it has to have that Clay, or us, we're talking about us today, has to have a relationship with God, a one-on-one relationship with God in their lives. So what David is saying, hey, I know God. What David is saying, when nobody's around, when a wild animal is coming at me, I have a relationship with God. God delivered me. God showed up for me. God was my conqueror. He gave me the ability to kill them, to actually kill lions and bears. And then he's saying, whatever that I've done, the relationship that I had with God in private is going to show up in public. That's what contentment means. He's saying, I'm content with God. A Clay has to be content, not by its ability, not by our ability, My brothers and sisters, today, I want to encourage you to experience God in your life, in your private life. And one of the things that David did, what he backtracked and he said, look, I mean, a bear and a lion and Goliath, what does that have to do? It's not the same thing. But he has a testimony. I want you to bring out your testimonies, my younger brothers and sisters. Say, God has done, I want you to count your encounters with God. Did God show up when you were sick, when you were crying out? Did he heal you? When you thought, oh my gosh, this obstacle, this thing that's setting before me, I don't think I don't think I'm going to get through it. Did God show up and he helped you get through it? When somebody told you that you are a nobody and you shouldn't be living, and you rose up. You rose from all those challenges and you came out to be. Did God help you do that? A person that's content counts back, counts all the blessings that God has done in their life. They have a relationship in private with God. Because when they're challenged in public, when they're bullied on social media, when their brothers and sisters say, oh, you're trying to preach the gospel, I know you. Or when your brothers and sisters tell you, oh, you're little, nobody's going to listen to you. You're not going to get anywhere. You're not made for this. Have you shared your dreams? What you want to do and people discouraged you? This message is for you today. David, he went to his brothers and his brothers like, hey, go keep your your sheep. What are you doing here? And then the other people that he talked to, yeah, there is this Philistine. He's been yelling at us for 40 days. And then he went to Saul. Saul said, you're a little boy. All of these discouragements. But David had a relationship with God in private. He had seen God's hand in private. And he tracked back and he said, yeah, God delivered me from a lion. God delivered me from a bear. God showed up. It's not because of me, but he enabled me to fight and I killed them. And he said it's the same thing because the fight is not between us and the Philistines. It's between God and the Philistines, and God is going to win. God is going to overcome. So the fight is between whomever is becoming against you and God always wins. Would you recognize him today? Would you say, I am the clay? Would you admit that you are the clay? You have been designed by God. Will you see who you are from God's perspective, God's point of view today? He designed you. He made you. And will you proclaim today that you've been created by a beautiful creator? You didn't just happen to be. You've been created for a purpose. So will you say today, whatever you're going through, I want you to rise up and say, I've been created. I've been created. I have a creator. I have a designer. And also, will you today make this covenant with God and say, I want to be content. Not because I am able. Not because I'm a macho man and I know what's good for me. But one thing that I know, like David, I know God. I've seen God's hand. He has saved me from so many things. Privately, I know God. And publicly, I know He's going to deliver me. And God is my shepherd. He will deliver me. Have you guys seen someone that is so content in your life? And you're like, how's that person not worried? How's that person not, when everybody's afraid, not afraid? When that person, like everybody's freaking out, crying, and that person is just staying still. That kind of person knows who they are. They know their identity. So I want you to know, I want for me to understand my identity in God. The identity that we are called for. We're clays. I am a clay. I have a creator, and I'm content. That's my identity. Because when something happens, when I am in a fight, when I'm in a war, when I'm in a worry, you see, there are so many things happening in the world right now. When we're in a panic, the fight is not between me and the world. The fight is not between me and my bully. The fight is not between me and my sisters and my brothers. The fight is not between me and the bear and the lion. The fight is not between me and Goliath. The fight is between my enemy, the thing that's rising upon me, and my God. And He wins. That's the person that's content. That's the person that rises up from all kinds of trouble and problems and say, God is God. I have a creator. I have a potter. Will you pray with me today? Will you say that I know my identity? I'm not going to see myself from the world's perspective. I'm not going to look at myself from what the media tells me that I am. I'm not going to talk about the books that tell me, oh, you're God, you're a little God. You can direct yourself. You can design your path. You know what's going to happen in the future. You can design, you can call your future in existence. No. You live a life of sacrifice. You live a life of a clay. Clay meets fire to become the clay that has been designed to become. A clay admits that it has a creator. A clay is content. Its destination, its future, who it is, the identity of us, clays, is not defined by the world. It's not defined by our troubles, defined by what happens to us on a daily basis. It's defined by what God does in our lives. He is our potter. If you're listening to this message for the first time and you're saying, who's this potter that you're talking about? The God who made you, the God who created you, the God who designed you, the God who has a plan for you, who has a purpose in your life, wants you to admit, to know, to submit, to have a covenant with Him today that you are a clay. If you're ready to say, I am a clay, And if you're ready to say that I've been created by a creator, an amazing creator designed my life, and you want to be content, not because of your ability, but because God is your potter and he's going to represent you. He's going to fight your fights and you're just going to dwell in him. You're going to be victorious because he's going to fight your fights. I want us to pray. Father God, I just thank you. I thank you for who you made us to be. Thank you for the clays that we've been made for your purpose, for your glory, for your identity to be reflected in our lives, for people to see us and say, oh, something amazing, something out of this world made that person. Because, not because what we look like, Father, but because of what you've designed in us, because the fight that you fight for us, because how much content we are in you, Father. The whole world might be on fire. The whole world might be on panic. The whole world might be going in a different direction. The whole world might say, it's unjust, it's unfair. But the clay that you made, the clay that we are, the clay that we proclaim that you are our creator, you are our God, and there is no other God but you, Father. You fight our fights. We live for you, Jesus. Thank you for teaching us there is no contentment without you. Thank you for teaching us there is no salvation without knowing and recognizing being a clay and being in a fire, being as a sacrifice clay on a daily basis. Thank you for delivering us from our enemies. Thank you for giving us victory, your victory, Father God, not ours, but yours, Father. A God of hosts, we worship you, we recognize you, and we love you, we honor you. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.